Friends, I-Fi, you want to watch super hit movie Lord of War in English? Then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, West Film Friends. In today's video, the movie you're going to talk about is called Lord of War. I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. This video is produced by West Film. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will give you a small review of the story of this film. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. Lord of War is a 2005 crime drama. A film written and directed by Niccol. It stars Nicolas Cage, Jared Leto, Bridget Moynahan, Ethan Hawke, and Eamon Walker in primary roles. The plot follows an unscrupulous Ukrainian-American man named Yuri Orlov, portrayed by Cage, as he participates in the global arms trafficking industry in the years preceding and succeeding the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The film was released in the United States by Lionsgate Films on September 16, 2005, and grossed $72.6 million at the box office. Critical reception was mixed. Many publications praised the opening sequence's messaging, along with Cage's performance as Yuri. Others criticized the film's lack of focus and handling of Yuri's character. Plot. In the early 1980s, Ukrainian-American restaurateur Yuri Orlov witnesses a gunfight amongst the Russian mafia in his area of Brighton Beach. The incident inspires him to begin trafficking arms for personal profit. Through a contact at his father's synagogue, he acquires an Uzi and makes his first sale, eventually convincing his reluctant younger brother Vitaly to become his partner in crime. The two brothers get their big break with the Lebanese Civil War, following the 1983 Beirut barracks bombings. As he prospers financially, Yuri increasingly witnesses his activities directly enabling atrocities and war crimes, and is relentlessly pursued by Jack Valentine of Interpol. Valentine represents a unique and persistent threat to Yuri's business because he has a particularly high moral compass and cannot be bribed or coerced into backing down. Meanwhile, an arms deal with a Colombian drug lord ends with the brothers being forcefully paid off with a large shipment of cocaine, to which Vitaly soon develops a severe addiction. Yuri checks him into a rehabilitation center and continues building his empire in his absence. He uses his profits to seduce and marry a supermodel named Ava Fontaine. She later gives birth to their son, Nicolas. Upon the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Yuri flies to Ukraine and meets his uncle Dmitry, a Soviet general who is overseeing the distribution of the assets of the Soviet armed forces. As he illegally supplies Yuri and rebuffs his competition, Dmitry is killed in a car bombing orchestrated by rival arms dealer Simeon Weiss. Yuri then expands his empire to Africa and starts doing business with Liberian dictator André Baptiste. As a gift to honor their alliance, Baptiste captures Weiss and offers Yuri a chance to execute him. Yuri refuses, but Baptiste puts the gun into his hand and pulls the trigger. Yuri is disturbed by Baptiste's appetite for bloodshed, including his use of child soldiers, but remains undeterred from selling weapons and ammunition to him. Valentine tells Ava that her husband is an arms trafficker, prompting her to confront him. In response, Yuri starts trading timber and oil, but quickly becomes frustrated with the lower profits of legitimate work. In 2000, he returns to crime after Baptiste visits him in person and offers him the largest payday of his career, a stash of blood diamonds. Suspicious of his behavior, Ava tails Yuri, unaware that Interpol is tracking her, and discovers the shipping container that holds his arms-dealing office. Yuri takes Vitaly to Africa to help him during a deal with the Sierra Leonean militia, which is allied with Baptiste and is preparing to destroy a refugee camp. There, Vitaly watches as a woman and a child are hacked to death by Baptiste's fighters and subsequently pleads with Yuri to cancel the sale. Yuri refuses, stating that the sale's impact on the refugees is not their concern and that Baptiste's men would kill them if they called off the deal. Unable to quell his distress, Vitaly steals a pair of grenades and destroys a truck full of weapons, also killing Baptiste's son before he is gunned down by the Sierra Leonean militants. Yuri is spared and receives half of the diamonds in exchange for the remaining truckload. He pays a Liberian doctor to remove the bullets from Vitaly's body and forge a death certificate, but a missed bullet is found by U.S. customs officials who promptly arrest Yuri. Ava takes Nikolai and leaves Yuri while his family disowns him. Valentine detains Yuri in anticipation of his trial and conviction, but Yuri, while dejected, is unfazed. He tells Valentine that a high-ranking military officer will soon knock on the door and insist on his release. He explains that while he is a criminal, he sometimes serves the interests of the U.S. government by covertly arming the enemies of its enemies. Valentine hears a knock at the door, looks at Yuri for a moment, and rebukes him. Yuri is released and returns to the illegal arms trade. The film concludes with a statement that the world's largest arms producers, the United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, China, and France, are also the permanent five of the United Nations Security Council. Cast: Nicolas Cage as Yuri Orlov, a Ukrainian-American international arms trafficker who sells to anyone who can pay. Jared Leto as Vitaly Orlov, Yuri's younger brother and business partner. Jean-Pierre Nshanian as Anatoly Orlov, the Catholic-turned-Jewish father of Yuri and Vitaly. Sheikh Tukmanyan as Irina Orlov, the Catholic mother of Yuri and Vitaly. Bridget Moynahan as Ava Fontaine, a world-renowned American supermodel and Yuri's wife. Ethan Hawke as Jack Valentine, an incorruptible Interpol agent and the primary threat to Yuri's livelihood. Ammon Walker as Andre Baptiste Sr., a hawkish Liberian dictator and one of Yuri's top clients, based on Liberia's former president and convicted war criminal Charles Taylor. Sammy Rotibi as Andre Baptiste Jr., the violent and self-indulgent son of Baptiste Sr., based on Charles MacArthur Emanuel. Ian Holm as Simeon Weiss, a European international arms trafficker who rivals Yuri and sells to only those who align with his political views or serve his political interests. Eugene Lazarev as Dmitry Orlov, a corrupt Soviet military officer and Yuri's uncle. Tanit Phoenix as Candy, Vitaly's girlfriend. Production. Pre-production. Lord of War originated a couple of years before 2004 when Andrew Niccol, a New Zealand screenwriter, wrote the original script. An agent of the Creative Artists Agency eventually gave Philippe Rousselet, a French film producer, the script in 2004, summarizing it as a Goodfellas in the world of arms dealing. Rousselet was impressed by the script but could not find an American studio that would take it on, as it was pitched to studios right before the beginning of the Iraq War. As commented by Entertainment Weekly, studios were not eager to finance a film that drew troubling conclusions about the role of the American military providing weapons to dictators. An additional complication was that scenes in the script were written to occur in up to 13 different countries, requiring filming in varying locations. The film planned to make use of the United Kingdom tax fund Movision, but the expenses cap in Section 48 of the Finance Act of 2004 disqualified the film. South Africa provided financial incentives for filming, such as paying back 15% of all expenditures incurred within its borders. Rousselet reported to Variety that the financing necessary for the film was a mixture of debt taken on with Citibank West, the VIP3 German tax fund, and foreign sales. The remainder was paid by Rousselet. Production shooting began on July 19, 2004. Production was primarily based in South Africa, the Czech Republic, and New York City. Scenes in Ukraine were filmed in the Czech Republic, and scenes in Africa, the Caribbean, and Beirut were all filmed in South Africa. Effort was taken to have extras that looked appropriate for every country depicted, both in attire and ethnicity. Due to the film's low budget, many scenes were constructed with only basic elements. One scene consisted entirely of 10,000 clay bricks and an extra in North African garb. While filming in the Czech Republic, Niccol discovered it was cheaper to purchase real firearms rather than props, and so he purchased 3,000 Kalashnikovs. Most were sold back at a loss, though some were sawed in half to remove them from circulation. Niccol commented that he found it disturbing how easy it was to purchase them. Niccol met a variety of arms dealers during the production process, which he came to like. He attributed their likability, despite their profession, to the fact that they were very good salesmen. A particular scene in the film featured a line of 50 T-72 tanks. These were provided by a source in the same country, and they told Niccol that he could use them until December, as they were needed back by then to sell to Libya. NATO had to be told about the tanks, as satellite imagery suggested a weapons buildup in the country. Another sequence of scenes showed Yuri co-piloting an Antonov An-12 transport plane. The plane was provided by an arms dealer, and it was actively being used for transporting firearms during the time of production. Release. Box office. Lord of War released theatrically on September 16, 2005. Lionsgate Films provided distribution in the United States, while Arclight Films distributed in other territories. It grossed a total of $24.1 million in the United States and Canada and $48.5 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $72.6 million. The film grossed $9.4 million in the United States and Canada, $105,000 in Latin America, $4.1 million in Europe, and $1.1 million in the Asian Pacific on their respective opening weekends. The film ranked number 3 in the opening weekend box office category, behind Just Like Heaven and The Exorcism of Emily Rose in the United States and Canada. Critical reception. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 62% of 150 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 6.30/10. The website's consensus reads, "While Lord of War is an intelligent examination of the gun trade, it is too scattershot in its plotting to connect." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 62 out of 100 based on 31 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale. The opening scene of the film, showcasing the point of view of a bullet being made and eventually fired out of a rifle, was praised by critics, 19. David Denby of The New Yorker characterized the sequence as malicious wit from Niccol, commenting that by forcing the audience to watch it, Niccol suggested that they were complicit in the sale of firearms. In a review by Harry Hahn, writing for the Film Journal Institute, he wrote that he wished the film was as direct and head-on as the opening sequence was. Rahul Hamid of Cineasta stated that the sensational opening effectively makes the same point that the film will explore, that violence around the world begins and ends directly at our doorstep. Praise was also given to Cage's performance as Yuri Orlov. Anne Hornaday of The Washington Post stated that Cage was cast well for Yuri, writing that he has the right scale and size to portray a man who isn't meant to resemble anyone real. Stephen McIntyre, writing for Business Record Des Moines, wrote that Cage's screen persona was a good balance of one-liners and witty dialogue. Jeffrey McNabb of Sight and Sound stated that Cage's interpretation of Yuri was someone audiences would root for due to his sleek charisma. Some publications criticized the focus of the film, questioning if the narrative and messaging were well balanced. In a review by the New York Amsterdam News, written by Natasha Grant, she characterized the narration by Cage as preachy without the audience being given a clear reason as to why they should care, stating the film may have been better as a documentary. McIntyre was critical of the film for playing fast and loose with both external and internal facts. He goes on to state that the primary focus of the film is on the illegal sale of firearms, but the film concludes criticizing the sale of firearms by governments, which McIntyre called a blatant bait and switch. Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly commented that Lord of War was a trailer, acting as a lecture, and bearing the length of a feature film. Mick LaSalle, writing for the San Francisco Chronicle, criticized the film for failing to answer questions regarding the logistics of gun running that it introduces, such as how buyers are found or where merchandise is stored. Critics also took issue with the handling of Yuri's character. LaSalle wrote that Yuri is a shell of a character designed to be a perfect gun dealer, and that, despite the character having turning points, the character hits metaphorical rock bottom twice, with LaSalle writing that the second did not have much meaning. Hahn referred to the character of Yuri as a soft-focused central character, and that due to the fact he was inspired by 5 different real-world individuals, McNabb stated that it was ironic that Yuri, despite being charismatic, never changed throughout the film. He writes that in one particular scene, it appears Yuri is full of such intense self-loathing that he goes on a booze and drug-fueled binge. But it does not have any narrative effect because he always recaptures his composure. McNabb compared the writing of Yuri's conscience to Yuri's drug habit being something that he is always able to get over, resulting in the critical nature of the arms trade coming across as ambivalent. 2 years after the film's release, Amnesty International, a non-governmental organization focusing on human rights, released a statement of support for the film due to it illustrating the deadly impact of the uncontrolled global arms trade. Accolades. The film received a special mention for excellence in filmmaking from the National Board of Review. Historical accuracy. Publications report that Yuri is based on 5 criminal arms dealers. Forbes, The Independent, and the New York Times name Victor Bout, a Russian arms dealer, as a specific source of inspiration. Yuri shares characteristics with Bout, and several events in Lord of War mirror actions attributed to him. For example, both men held the nickname Merchant of Death, sold weapons to both sides of the same conflict, and traveled with multiple passports, among other similarities. In 2015, the National Security Archive reported that Sarkis Soganalian, an Armenian-Lebanese arms dealer, was an inspiration for Yuri's character. Sequel. A sequel to Lord of War titled Lords of War was scheduled to begin filming in the fall of 2023. Cage is reportedly returning as Yuri Orlov, as well as producer alongside Rousselet, with Bill Skarsgård reportedly executive producing and playing the character's son. CAA Media Finance is handling the United States and Canada rights, while Film Nation Entertainment is representing the film's sales in all other territories. Yuri Orlov argues that his products kill fewer people than tobacco and alcohol. He has a point, but it's more fun and takes longer to die that way. There are few pleasures to be had from an AK-47 bullet to the brain, and no time to enjoy them. Yuri is an international arms dealer who has done business with every army but the Salvation Army. He cheerfully tours the world's flashpoints, a war-to-war salesman in a dark suit and tie. Lord of War is a bleak comedy, funny in a catch-22 sort of way, and at the same time, an angry outcry against the gun traffic that turns 12-year-olds into killers and cheapens human life to the point where might makes not only right, but everything else. Yuri is played by Nicolas Cage. In another of those performances, you cannot easily imagine anyone else doing. He plays an immigrant from Ukraine who has the cocky self-assurance, the snaky surface charm, the breezy intellectual justification for the most indefensible acts. He will sell to anyone, anytime he tells us during his narration, which confides the secrets of his trade. He never sold to Osama bin Laden because he was always bouncing checks. Yuri's world is a small one. He has few competitors and a short but frequently updated list of clients. The world's leading arms dealer when Yuri goes into business is Simeon Weiss, Ian Holm, who prefers not to do business with people he thinks are evil, although his definition of evil is extremely flexible. Yuri asks Simeon to let him team up, an offer Simeon rejects. He'll eventually lose a lot of business by that decision. The clients come from all over. There is a moment in the film when Yuri gets some bad news. Peace talks have started in a particularly promising market. He shifts his focus to the Bosnian arena. When they say they're having a war, they keep their word. He also finds 2 good customers in Africa, the Liberian dictator Baptiste Sr., Eamon Walker, and his son Baptiste Jr., Sammy Roteby. Sr. is capable of shooting people dead without notice, just in a fit of pique. During a meeting with Yuri, he kills an inattentive aide and seems ready to shoot Yuri next, but Yuri grabs the gun back and says, "Now you'll have to buy it, because it's a used gun." It's the kind of joke that appeals to Sr. Yuri's life and even his fortune are saved. Yuri lives in Manhattan luxury with the former model Ava Fontaine, Bridget Moynahan, who believes him, or pretends to believe him, when he says he's in the international shipping business. That business takes a turn for the better with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the sudden appearance on the black market of enormous caches of weapons. Luckily, Yuri is related to a now-retired general in Ukraine, and they do business. The movie, directed by Niccol, The Truman Show, Gattaca, has some of the same stylistic aggressiveness as David O. Russell's Three Kings. Consider a brilliant early montage that takes a bullet's eye view as it moves from ore to the assembly line to finishing, packaging, distribution, sale, and eventual use. The montage ends with the bullet passing through the brain of a young man. It makes the point that at every step along the way, arms manufacturers are producing death as their end product. That doesn't much bother Yuri, who believes that wars will be fought whether or not he sells arms. In that, he is correct. There is the disagreement, however, of a stubborn Interpol agent named Valentine, Ethan Hawke, who thinks he could save some lives by putting Yuri out of business. Some of their encounters resemble the spy versus spy feature in Mad Magazine, as when Valentine chases a ship filled with arms, and Yuri is able to repaint its name and disguise it before the law gets close enough. Helping Yuri at first, and then a distinct problem for him, is his younger brother Vitaly, Jared Leto. When they're desperately disguising the ship and need a Dutch flag they do not have, it is Vitaly's lateral thinking that suggests a French flag flown sideways looks like a Dutch flag. After movies like Hotel Rwanda, Before the Rain, and Welcome to Sarajevo, the cold cynicism of Lord of War plays like a deadly footnote. People are killed because guns are available. Wars lower the average age of soldiers until in some places they are fought by children with no idea of their original cause. It's hypnotic, like the gaze of a poisonous snake, how Yuri stares into the face of this horror and counts his profits. Will fate and justice eventually catch up with him? Maybe, unless money is the answer. In Yuri's experience, it usually is. Movie review. It's funny because the movie is so pessimistic in its sense of life. It tells the story of a Ukrainian gun runner and his adventures in illegal weapons, dealing with African warlords and former Soviet military officers. A film like this could easily fall into the trap of being super preachy or melodramatic, as in films like Traffic or Crash. For me, the best way to tackle these subjects is to embrace the darkness and focus on strong characters. This is what Sicario did so well. Lord of War is similar but more stylized and more funny. The movie opens with Nicolas Cage talking directly to the audience, followed by a sort of music video showing the journey of a single bullet, ending with it being shot into the head of a child soldier. Like many other elements of the film, it's all rather on the nose but well executed. From there, we have a really well-paced origin story for Yuri, as we see his journey from Brighton Beach to the underworld gun trade with his capricious brother Vitaly, played wonderfully by Jared Leto. 30 minutes into the film, we get our expected complication, a love interest for Yuri, a model named Ava, who ultimately triggers Yuri's downfall. We also meet Yuri's antagonist, an idealistic Interpol agent named Jack Valentine, who hunts him relentlessly for the duration of the film. The brisk pacing in the opening allows the movie to take its time on developing its themes and characters effectively in the middle section. We get to know Yuri's brother Vitaly quite well. We see his struggles with drug addiction and his underlying wanderlust. This makes the tragedy he suffers at the end of the film more impactful. The story beats in Liberia are also quite memorable, not only in what they reveal about Yuri's character, but also in their social commentary about Western naivete about much of the continent. It is not a flattering portrayal to be sure, but it makes an important point about good intentions not being enough when it comes to fighting evil. Yuri sees himself as a symptom of that evil, justifying the lavish lifestyle his arms dealing affords him by saying that if not him, some other person would be doing it anyway. He isn't wrong, but it doesn't make him justified. The film actually takes an interesting turn with this idea by having Yuri's wife convince him to go legit, which he does successfully for some time until rather contrived circumstances force him back into the life. The final interrogation scene between Yuri and Jack is almost perfect, only slightly undone by Jack's rather corny final line. The dark reality allowing Yuri to walk out of Interpol custody really sells the film's cynical theme. It emphasizes the pointlessness of Vitaly's tragic end. In our fallen world, there are no easy answers to questions of sovereignty, violence, and moral righteousness. There will always be corrupt governments and freelancers ready to put expedience over principle. It is perhaps apt that Victor Bott, the real-life Yuri who inspired the film, was recently released from a U.S. prison as part of a questionable deal with Russia. Art imitates life, life imitates art. Lord of War is both entertaining and insightful. In its best moments, it can even be both, such as Yuri's line during his ode to the AK-47, "It's so easy even a child can use it," and they do. It oversimplifies and can be cartoonish at times, particularly the Liberia and Soviet Union sections, but they all serve the broader ideas and characters purposefully. There are no wasted scenes here. What's more, this may be one of Nicolas Cage's most nuanced and artful performances of his career. That alone should be reason enough for many to check this out. I can also recommend it just for how well shot it is, thanks to Andrew Niccol's excellent direction. As in Gattaca, he shows off a knack for visual storytelling that stays in your head long after the credits roll. Gunrunners come in different forms. In westerns, the shifty figure selling weapons to renegade Indians is always a bad guy. On the other hand, the heroic credentials of Casablanca's Rick Blaine are immediately established, or at least they were for liberal Second World War audiences, when it is revealed that he ran guns for victims of fascist aggression in the 1930s. Shaw's Major Barbara features the locus classicus of the subject in the philosophical discourse of the suave, multimillionaire arms manufacturer Andrew Undershaft, who justifies his profession and confuses his critics with paradoxical arguments and cynicism posing as enlightenment. In writer-director Andrew Niccol's Lord of War, the central figure, freelance gunrunner Yuri Orlov, Nicolas Cage, acts like the craven undercover creatures in westerns, but talks in the self-justifying manner of Undershaft. Like Gattaca, which New Zealander Niccol directed, and The Truman Show, which he scripted, Lord of War is a moral fable treated with a surface realism. Yuri Orlov is a Ukrainian-American whose family emigrated to the States under the pretense of being Jewish and now run a kosher cafe in a New York suburb. One day, he sees two hitmen attempt to kill a mafia boss in a restaurant and has an epiphany. He gets out of the restaurant business and starts trafficking in guns. Within a few years, through Russian contacts, he becomes a major dealer selling arms in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, getting rich and marrying his dream girl, from whom he conceals the source of his wealth. There is, however, always breathing down his neck an Interpol agent, Ethan Hawke. With seemingly limitless powers and resources, this nemesis is out to nail him. There is a brilliant opening sequence that follows a bullet from a Russian factory through various hands until it blows a hole between the eyes of a black child in Africa. The voiceover commentary is sharp and often very funny. Niccol, who reminds us that the world's chief suppliers of arms are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, is deeply serious. Cage, who is as charming as his pursuer, Hawke, is graceless, gives an excellent performance as the slippery Yuri fighting a winning battle with his conscience. But the film lacks social and political complexity and is frequently unconvincing, especially the aspect involving the unlikely Interpol inspector. Nicolas Cage is a man that likes to run with flashlights, with strange haircuts on his head. I'm not into that, so most of the time, I'm trying to stay clear of him. I don't watch his movies, so he doesn't try to creep on the magazine covers that much. I hear now and then, though, that Lord of War is the one good Nicolas Cage movie. When Josie browsed Netflix on Saturday morning and asked me, "Baby, do you want to watch this? It's the one good Nick Cage movie." It was too much for me. I cracked and finally watched it. Lord of War is a fictional account of the gun trade. Yuri Orlov, Cage, is a fictional character, but apparently the history lesson in the movie is pretty accurate, and Orlov is a plausible example of the kind of person the drug trade builds. The son of an Ukrainian immigrant in Little Odessa, New York, Orlov wasn't satisfied to work at the family restaurant, so one day, after witnessing a violent mob confrontation in the neighborhood, he decided to start selling gun with the urge to be the best. He meets Simeon Weiss, Holm, at Berlin Gun Fair, who make him understand that the only way to succeed as a gun salesman is that feed both sides of a war so they can destroy each other. Stone cold in front of human sorrow, Orlov quickly rises to the top and gets whatever he ever dreamed of, included the stonking hot Ava Fontaine, Moynahan. With the success and the fame also come Jack Valentine, Ethan Hawke, a dedicated Interpol agent with a Robin Hood complex, determined to take Orlov down. I don't know how much of a documentary value Lord of War has, but what I like best about it is its presentation. Yuri Orlov rose up from the dirty streets of Little Odessa to become someone, but it's at the price of his soul. Feeding African dictators weapons so they can conduct massacre over massacre is something the viewer tends to forget, as Orlov is being portrayed in a very sympathetic manner. Other characters don't seem to forget it, though, as they gradually make a vacuum around him as the movie goes. Lord of War is one of those movies that I'm not sure how to watch. It tries to place itself above morality, but I feel it did a poor job at being objective about the work of Yuri Orlov. Whenever his brother Vitaly, Leto, and him saw people die from the weapons they sold, Orlov kept saying, "It's not our fight." I beg to differ. If you sell guns, it's your fight. If you're feeding both sides weapon, there's an ethics problem to be had somewhere down the road. I guess the lesson to be learned is that if you only care about money, people will leave you alone in your tower of value. Very Taoist. Everything needs balance, even war. When it's economically enhanced by money-hungry people, it's not war anymore, just a senseless massacre. Lord of War is an awkward bit of storytelling, but it's a sincere effort to say something that matters. Today on Cage Club, we try to put a gun into every hand on the planet in Warlord. Lord of War. This may be the first movie in a while that just doesn't do it for me. I've seen the movie once before and liked it all right, but within the context of Cage Club, it may rank towards the bottom as one of the lowest rated films so far. Cage plays Yuri Orlov, a Ukrainian American who becomes the biggest arms dealer in the world. He comes from nothing and wants to become a self-made man, so he sees an opportunity to use his family connections to get his foot in the door of national arms dealing. He drags his poor younger brother Vitaly into the lifestyle as well, and he winds up becoming addicted to cocaine. He tricks a beautiful girl into liking him and eventually marrying him by tossing around his newfound wealth, only to ignore and lie to her for their entire marriage. He meets and befriends some of the most despicable killers in the world, and none of it ever seems to weigh on his conscience. The worst man he sells to is the fictional leader of Liberia, named Andre Baptiste, a psychotic madman with way too much power. He takes a shine to Yuri and bestowed the moniker Lord of War upon him the first time they meet, on account of all the armies that Yuri has helped arm, thus leading to wars. Baptiste may also call Yuri Lord of War because he is mispronouncing the word warlord. However, Baptiste assures Yuri he is not mispronouncing it and simply states, "I prefers it my way." Yuri is also being hunted by a super cop that can never seem to catch him, play by Ethan Hawke. Over the course of 2 decades, the two are entangled in a game of international gun smuggling. Yuri attempts to leave the gun running behind him, but is drawn back into it by Baptiste for one last score. Everything goes awry, and Yuri's brother Vitaly is killed, leading Yuri's parents to disown him. Yuri finally accepts that he is a terrible person, having lost everything he thought meant something to him. Upon his return to America, Yuri is arrested and interrogated by super cop Ethan Hawke, but he's released due to his powerful connections with the United States military, whom he also works for from time to time. In the end, Yuri is back doing what he does best, selling guns and being a scapegoat for certain superpowers. Now that he has no friends or family to care for him, Yuri can do his job with no conscience and truly become a monster. He is the necessary evil in the world. I think what may be the issue is that this movie does all the things that the film adaptation tells you not to do. There is sensational violence just to be explicit, a deus ex machine, and a constant voiceover explaining everything. The voiceover is overbearing at points and is used to flood the viewer with too much information, most of which never becomes relevant later. I feel voiceover works best when what you are hearing contradicts what you see, or fills in the blanks of what isn't shown to a small degree. This movie feels like someone reading a book to you for 2 hours. I don't want to trash this film all the way. I do think there was great production value. This movie looks amazing, and there is no doubt that all the money is up there in the screen. I just think that it tries to tell too much story. I thought the movie was based on a true story of one particular guy, but it turns out the film is an amalgam of several people's story. It feels like several lives smashed into one, and I feel like the lack of focusing on a single pivotal moment in the life of this gun runner might have been a better way to get the point across. That will do it for Lord of War. Next up on Cage Club is another first-time screening for me, The Weatherman. I have heard a lot of good stuff about this movie, and it's got Nick Cage holding a crossbow on the front cover of the DVD. Was Cage really the one responsible for the resurgence in archery that Katniss, Hawkeye, and Merida from Brave would come to be known for? Find out next time at Cage Club. Lord of War, a misfire of a political satire about the international gun market, opens with a killer scene. Nicolas Cage standing on a veritable carpet of bullet casings. Mr. Cage's character, Yuri Orlov, is a gun runner who has placed untold weapons in untold numbers of hands. Now surrounded by gutted buildings and dressed to impress, a cigarette burning between his fingers, Yuri looks straight into the camera and wonders aloud how he can furnish everyone in the world with a gun to call his very own. This carpet of casings also serves as a launching pad for a subsequent and even more outlandish opening credit sequence that tracks a bullet from its manufacture in Russia to its final resting place in the skull of a young African. A bullet in the head always seizes the imagination, or at least the audience's attention, but because the African is merely cinematic collateral damage, the image registers both as showboating and as a warning shot for the problems to come. The screenwriter for Lord of War, Andrew Niccol, lavishes a great deal of time and many words building a case against guns. Unfortunately, the film's director, who also happens to be Mr. Niccol, enjoys playing with toy guns. His words may say no, but his overworked, overslick visual style says lock and load, baby. The problem, of course, is that violence is so inherently cinematic, so visually and orally captivating. Loud pops, big bangs, and the sights and sounds of bodies seizing up and spurting blood have long been the stock in trade of certain movies, which partly explains why the bangs are getting ever louder, the bloodletting more spectacular. The noise in these films has grown so deafening that it can be hard to hear the message, if there even is one. Especially when that message carries a familiar, been there, done that, eat your oatmeal because it's good for you moralism. Like, guns are bad, corporations are soulless, and some first-world governments traffic in third-world misery. To which any reasonably informed viewer might be expected to wonder, and your point is what exactly? Mr. Niccol's point here, it appears, is both to entertain and to instruct with the story of Yuri, a Russian émigré who rises from humble Brooklyn to become a globe-trotting gun runner with all the moral reasoning of a flea. Guided by Mr. Cage's intermittent voiceover, the story tracks Yuri's decades-long evolution as a merchant of death, saddled with a few familiar distractions. A beautiful model wife played by Bridget Moynahan, and a drug-addled brother played by Jared Leto. Yuri gets his break in the early 1990s when he snaps up material in the recently imploded Ukraine that he subsequently offloads in war-ravaged Africa. Like everything else in this film, Mr. Cage's performance is watchable, if never credible, because his director never resolves the disconnect between this star's function to entertain and that of his character to repel. Arguably one of the best movies of the 2000s, and Nicolas Cage's best performance as a lead actor, the film Lord of War, released in 2005, is a realistic and unfiltered take in the role of illegal arms dealers who facilitate the sale and transfer of arms trafficking throughout the international arms industry, which continues to be one of the world's most profitable endeavors. Lord of War, while non-fictional in its story, is actually based off of the lives and exploits of different real-life arms smugglers. Lord of War is directed by Niccol and stars a cast of Nicolas Cage, Jared Leto, Ethan Hawke, and Bridget Moynahan. Nicolas Cage plays Yuri Orlov, the son of Ukrainian refugees from the Soviet Union, where he and his brother Vitaly help their parents out in their Ukrainian restaurant as cooks and helpers. While Vitaly is somewhat satisfied with this simple life of cooking borscht and washing dishes, Yuri wants to achieve the American dream and get out of Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, where he grew up after leaving Ukraine. He struggles to grasp at any real business opportunity in order to get out of the shadow of his ordinary life in Brooklyn. However, one day when he is dining at a restaurant in Brighton Beach, the business idea he needs comes to life for Yuri in the form of a Russian mobster killing 2 would-be assassins and fending off their attack with AK-47 Kalashnikov rifles. Yuri believes that there is a lot of money to be made in international arms sales and decides to go into business despite the protests of his brother Vitaly and the fact that his parents don't know what he's up to. One scene in particular that stands out in Yuri's beginning as an illegal arms dealer is when he tells his brother that since there are so many McDonald's and gun stores in America already, he needs his business to be international in its focus. At first, Yuri feels that dealing arms is comparable to serving food at a restaurant. He justifies his nefarious business by narrating to the audience that it's providing for a part of human nature, in his opinion, the instinct to kill and harm others, as documented by the earliest human skeletons who had spears in their heads and rib cages. While Vitaly, Yuri's brother, has moral reservations about what Yuri is doing, he decides to join him later on as they crisscross the globe during the late 1980s and into the 1990s, dealing with corrupt governments, genocidal dictators, and other more ruthless arms dealers as their competition. As Yuri becomes more popular and wealthy with the illegal arms business, he runs up against a by-the-book, incorruptible, and idealistic Interpol agent, Jack Valentine, Ethan Hawke, who tries unsuccessfully to track Yuri's business dealings down by air and by sea. Despite the fact that his brother, Vitaly, becomes a drug addict and is an unreliable business partner, Yuri continues to run his illegal arms business as a one-man show. While a fictional story, Lord of War is based off of real-life conflicts and real-life people who were involved in the illegal arms trade. These conflicts include the 1982 Lebanon War, the Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan against the Mujahideen, the Civil War in Liberia during the 1990s, etc. The movie does not gloss over the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the impact that the end of this Cold War conflict had on the rest of the world in terms of arms sales. Yuri is able to become a very wealthy and powerful arms dealer in the film due to his family connections in Ukraine and the sheer weaponry and arsenal that the Soviet military left unused. Like his arms business, which is run under false pretenses, he does the same with his love life as he falls for a fashion model and childhood crush, Ava Fontaine, Bridget Moynahan, who he sets himself up with under the guise of a false photo shoot. Despite the fact that his parents don't know about his illegal dealings, he lies to his new wife regularly, and his brother ends up in a drug rehabilitation center. Yuri does not give up on the arms business because he likes it, is good at it, and is unable to go straight in legal business endeavors. However, in the wake of all of his success, innocent men, women, and children get killed by the guns, bombs, ammunition, tanks, planes, etc. that he sells and profits off of. As the film progresses, the director makes clear that Yuri has sold his soul in this dirty trade, and it may cost him his life or the lives of others close to him if he doesn't stop. In a way, the audience who watches Lord of War could be most closely aligned with the perspective of the Interpol agent Jack Valentine. He knows that Yuri is a bad person and he wants to bring him down, but will it make any difference to bring one sole arms dealer down when billions of dollars are exchanged around the world each year through both legal and illegal arms sales? Like Jack, the audience may question the nobility of bringing down one arms sales dealer like Yuri when there are dozens of them out there, and presidents, prime ministers of the major countries are the biggest arms dealers of them all. Yuri never takes full responsibility for his business dealings during the film, even if the sale of his arms causes bloodshed and death. He remarks bluntly to his brother Vitaly during one scene, "We don't talk about it." How many car salesmen talk about their work? How many cigarette salesmen talk about their work? Both their products kill more people every year than mine. At least mine comes with a safety switch. Those guys can leave their work at the office, so can I. In Yuri's opinion, he may be evil, but he's necessary evil because there are other people or governments out there like him involved in the business, but sometimes they can't have their fingerprints on the gun. Despite the pressures placed on him by family, friends, and the law, Yuri is committed to doing what he does best without having the moral imperative to stop. As I don't want to reveal the ending, the first time you see it, you may be shocked, but this film doesn't deal in black and white, and that's what I love about it. There are numerous shades of gray that go along with the black and white, and the ending of Lord of War falls within those shades of gray. Lord of War doesn't have your typical Hollywood ending, and that's partly what it makes it such an alluring film. On top of the exquisite directing, acting by Nicolas Cage, Jared Leto, Ethan Hawke, etc., and the deep political and philosophical themes behind this film, I highly recommend it. A watchable performance from Nicolas Cage provides the firepower for this uneven black comedy about arms dealing by writer-director Andrew Niccol, who wrote the screenplay for The Truman Show. Cage plays Yuri, a Ukrainian-American arms dealer, hassled by an idealistic Interpol agent played by Ethan Hawke. There are 550 million weapons in circulation globally, one for every 12 people on the planet, Yuri frowningly tells us. The question is, how do we arm the other 11? After the Cold War, Yuri uses his old country connections to bribe disgruntled ex-Soviet army brass, who in return for suitcases full of US dollars allow vast amounts of their uninventoried armaments to go walkies, to be sold by Yuri to West African warlords. Along the way, Yuri acquires a massive Manhattan apartment, a trophy wife, and, like his reprobate brother Vitaly, Jared Leto, has a bit of a cocaine habit, although he has developed a taste for mixing it with gunpowder, the mixture his end users give to Kalashnikov-toting 12-year-old boys to pep them up for battle. Niccol's script tries to fudge, with an uneasy joke, the issue of whether his likable anti-hero ever sold material to Osama bin Laden. The answer is no, because Osama's checks always bounced. Strange, given that later on, Yuri will claim that big arms buyers are always creditworthy. Cage carries the movie, particularly with a drawl aria about the global superiority of the Kalashnikov. A unique example of a Russian product being demonstrably better than the American equivalent, the M16 assault rifle. That great equine face persuasively suggests a man who every day hands over another little piece of his soul to Beelzebub. Brimming with cinematic confidence, cynicism, chutzpah, plus dramatic bungles, Andrew Niccol's ambitious Lord of War views today's international arms trade through its anti-hero, a young Ukrainian American lured by the promise of wealth in the weapons biz. A stark departure for Niccol from his interest in the near future, The Truman Show, Gattaca, Simone. This globalist dramedy owes much to the political gallows humor of Joseph Heller's Catch-22 and the rise and fall structure of the conventional biopic. Despite Nicolas Cage's strongest perf in many a season, ragged shifts in tone will cool out involvement and keep general BO numbers in the modest range. Few films since Michael Mann's The Insider have tackled a burning, complex contemporary topic with the ferocity and filmic energy that Lord of War applies, and Niccol should earn considerable plaudits for his daring approach. Coming fast on the heels of The Constant Gardener, Niccol's film is more original, particularly in its refreshingly politically incorrect angle on Africa. At the same time, Niccol's reliance on massive chunks of voiceover narration, care of the hard-working Cage, and a snide tone leave the unfortunate impression that the film is extremely callous toward its subject. Lord of War wades in the dangerous waters of politically black humor, which can capsize the most important message without a strong hand in command. With Yuri Orlov Cage speaking directly to the camera from the first moments, followed by an astonishing title sequence filmed from the POV of a bullet as it goes from being manufactured to puncturing the skull of an African youth, Pick's strengths and problems are instantly on display. From Yuri's blithe attitude toward his work as a weapons dealer to the almost goofy camera angle of the bullet, the comic tone is established and then suddenly violated by real violence, leaving odds unsure how to respond. Yuri narrates his upbringing in Gotham's Little Odessa quarter, where he and brother Vitaly, Jared Leto, were raised by their Ukrainian emigre parents. Yuri witnesses a mob hit in 1982 and realizes that there's a real demand for guns and bullets, and cash could be made supplying them. From strictly small-time customers, Yuri, in almost absurdly quick order, brings now-partner Vitaly along to the West Berlin Arms Fair of 1983, where master arms dealer Simeon Weiss, Ian Holm, gives him a one-sentence brush-off. "I'm in the business to change governments." Yuri, though, is in this business to do business, a crucial distinction that defines his character for the rest of the film. If Lord of War makes its most obvious point by decrying the human cost of the global proliferation of arms, its subtler point is that, in Yuri's view, selling AK-47s or helicopter gunships is no different from selling refrigerators. Even this is made comic, with a slow-mo shot of an automatic machine gun accompanied by the sound of a clinging cash register. Soon, Yuri is in charge of illegally registered sea vessels, charging on board his dogged Interpol agent Valentine, Ethan Hawke, the relentless cat to Yuri's mouse for most of the remaining 90 minutes. Editor Zack Steinberg deserves high credit for the film's rollicking sense of time and years whizzing by. On his frequent international trips, Yuri continually sees a girl from his youth, Little Odessa goddess Eva, Bridget Moynahan, now a supermodel. While Vitaly gives in to the temptations of cocaine, Yuri elaborately arranges to track down Eva, and soon has her as his trophy wife in lavish Central Park East digs. Pick shifts to a more troublesome midsection, divided roughly between a dull, unconvincing set of domestic scenes involving Yuri and Eva's parched marriage, and Yuri's dealings with a bloodthirsty Liberian dictator named Baptiste Sr., Eamon Walker. Regularly dressed in his Reservoir Dogs-style black suit in a country filled with dead bodies and muddy streets, Yuri looks increasingly strange in Liberia's mayhem. A sense of doom slowly descends on Yuri's character, most brilliantly visualized when Valentine catches up with him again in an airborne chase and handcuffs him on the ground of a dusty airfield. Niccol's script is finally too much for the film to hold on to. Yuri's life, globe-hopping, and two-facedness appear to be more than any one feature could possibly contain. While the Yuri character is never less than fascinating, the script struggles with its approach to him. Lost along the way are some potential dramatic anchors, such as the father-son dynamic between Weiss and Yuri that seems to be a central story point, but is never developed. Nor does Yuri and Vitaly's relationship ever ring quite true, including a third-act climax that nearly unravels the entire film. What's missing most in the story is a certain humanity that Cage must provide on his own. He brings a theatrical irony to bear here with brilliance, even as his ever-present voice on the soundtrack serves to give texture and dimension, even if it goes on much too long. By contrast, Walker is far too emphatic in one note, Moynahan blander than bland, and Holm criminally cut short of screen time. Pick looks and feels authentically international, with Lenzer Amir Mokri finding distinct imagery to match Gotham, Czech, and South African settings. Song selection, like much of the humor, is a bit too smarty-pants for the film's own good. Andrew Niccol is a very smart guy. He wrote The Truman Show, the first draft of The Terminal for the Beard, and wrote and directed the supreme sci-fi noir Gattaca, which has to be one of the most prescient pieces of entertainment of the last 20 years. In 2005, he released Lord of War, which came and went in theaters, but it's a film that I feel is widely undervalued. An action flick with a brain, however cynical, and it's a title that deserves reconsideration and a second life. It sits at 61% overall at Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't terrible. But I really feel that way too many critics missed the boat on this one, and that's a shame, because with more support, it might have had a better chance at connecting. Some people loved it and saw the film for what it is, a dry, ironic, and savage indictment of military policy and the worldwide demand for guns and wholesale death. Lionsgate, who released the film after it was produced independently, did a poor job of marketing, aside from the incredible one-sheets, selling it as a straightforward action tale and showcasing the film's explosions in the trailer, totally making it out to be a standard blow-em-up, something that Lord of War most definitely is not. Based on true events, the busy narrative concerns international arms dealer Yuri Orlov, Cage, as he travels from war zone to war zone looking for potential buyers. He supplies whole armies, ruthless mercenaries, and sometimes entire nations with their guns and tanks and battlefield equipment, and he gets paid cold hard cash. Lots and lots of it. Yuri has zero conscience. These people, no matter how poor or uneducated, want their guns and they're going to get them one way or another. So why not have them buy their goods from him? He's just giving the people what they want. On Yuri's trail is an FBI agent played by Ethan Hawke, who is always one step behind. And there's some B-story action involving Yuri's model wife, hottie Bridget Moynahan, which isn't as engaging as the material that deals with Yuri's inherently dangerous profession, but by no means sinks the movie. He's also got a cokehead brother played by wide-eyed Jared Leto, who might become Yuri's undoing. Niccol's poison arrow satire darts hit all of their intended targets in Lord of War. This is a purposefully cold and pessimistic movie about a merchant of death, a Lord of War, a guy who most likely isn't going to learn anything by the time the narrative comes to a conclusion. He's happy to be doing what he's doing. Thrilled, actually. Yuri isn't likable, but Cage makes him engaging, and it's one of his better performances, and came during that solid run of work which included Matchstick Men, Adaptation, and The Weatherman. He seemed very much attuned to the script's tonal shifts, and he appeared right at home playing an immoral, greedy hustler. The film also has a note-perfect ending that I just love, which comments bitterly on all that has come before it. The story really couldn't have ended any other way if it wanted to be taken seriously, and I love how Niccol didn't back down from the nasty truth that his movie displays. Lord of War also has a scary, brilliant opening title sequence, one of the best I've ever seen, to be totally honest, giving the audience a front-row, bullet's-eye view of the birth of ammunition, from melted metal all the way to being placed in the chamber of an M16 before being fired into someone's skull. The camera positions itself on the side of a random bullet, and we follow that bullet's life from creation to eventual resting place. It's a small tour de force of filmmaking, announcing right up front that this movie isn't playing by the normal set of rules. Working with extra slick images from ace cinematographer Amir Mokri, Bad Boys 2, Man of Steel, Niccol crafted an exceedingly photogenic film, a work that shows how sexy guns can be, but one that's also unafraid to show their deadly capabilities. Nicolas Cage is an extremely versatile actor. Although normally he can be distinguished by his distinctive mannerisms, in much the same was as Brad Pitt can, he has, over the years, taken on plenty of roles that are both diverse and memorable. Whether it be David Lynch's Wild at Heart, an all-out actioner like The Rock, or something much more understated like Captain Corelli's Mandolin, Cage has always had the charisma to capture cinema audiences across the globe. In Lord of War, Cage plays Yuri Orlov, a small-time Ukrainian restaurateur living in Little Odessa, who finds that he has a particular talent for selling arms and decides to go into business with his younger brother Vitaly, Jared Leto, slowly working his way up the food chain to play in the big league. Hounded by Ethan Hawke's Interpol agent Jack Valentine and forced to go up against Ian Holmes' rival arms dealer, Simeon Weiss, Yuri uses his self-made rules and cunning to get out of almost every scrape imaginable, whether it be ditching a plane load of guns or hiding a cargo ship. The trouble is that he is just too good at his job and simply has no reason and no morality which would drive him to stop his illegal activities. This becomes even more of an issue when he becomes involved with the gorgeous supermodel Eva, Bridget Moynahan, who expects to be kept like a princess but initially does not want to know the truth about where the money comes from. Of course, as with any tale like this, and it could be compared in narrative to many other movies including Scarface, eventually something has to give. Unfortunately, the climax leaves you with an unsatisfactory feeling that the previous 2 hours had been a big waste of time and everybody loses out in the end. It's just plain depressing. Cage is on good form as Yuri, the central and driving character behind the whole story. Almost never off-screen, we see him don several bad haircuts as he narrates his progress up through the illegal arms underworld. The trouble is, he is not really a very likable character. Almost devoid of any redeemable features, his charm soon wears off, and his utter lack of morality is an unusual trait for the hero of a movie to possess. Ethan Hawke reminds us once again, especially following on from Assault on Precinct 13, that he should be on screen more often. And despite his relatively limited supporting role here, he is one of the best things about the movie. Bridget Moynahan, who fared well opposite the ever-watchable Will Smith in I, Robot, is suitably glamorous as the model Eva, possibly one of Yuri's only weak spots, and Ian Holm barely gets more than a couple of lines, but is reliably shady as the veteran rival arms dealer Weiss. Fresh from playing Colin Farrell's best friend lover in Alexander, Jared Leto does a superb job as the more moral younger brother, Vitaly, who displays the kind of necessary conscience that Yuri clearly lacks, and who also gets addicted to cocaine for his troubles. It is also worth noting Ammon Walker as one of Yuri's best customers, a warlord with a habit of restructuring the English language to unique effect, hence nicknaming Cage's Yuri the Lord of War. Shot like a glossier version of Three Kings, the movie is just as stylish, suitably well narrated and well developed, and has just the right mix of action, thrills, and drama. Unfortunately, it is all sound and fury, eventually signifying nothing, and by the end of it all, you wonder whether you gained anything from the entire experience. The central character's extreme cynicism is, at times, so depressing that it slowly eats away at the viewer's will to live. I like Nicolas Cage, and almost any movie he has been in, he has made infinitely more watchable. But unfortunately, just like his character can't save his soul, even he can't save the movie. Lord of War's Yuri Orlov, played by the incomparable Nicolas Cage, is based on a notorious real-life international arms dealer. 3 years before the release of the MCU's seminal Iron Man, Cage's portrayal of Yuri Orlov in 2005 introduced audiences to a charismatic global war technocrat with much to gain and even more to lose. As Yuri Orlov tells viewers during Lord of War's surreal prologue, there are over 550 million firearms in worldwide circulation. That's one firearm for every 12 people on the planet. The only question is, how do we arm the other 11? In Yuri Orlov's quest to put weapons into every able-bodied pair of hands in the world, Cage shines in portraying a key player in the international theater of modern warfare. Lord of War's Yuri Orlov is based on several real international arms dealers from recent history, chief among them being the notorious Victor Bout. Though Orlov is comparable to the MCU's Tony Stark, Lord of War does not count among Nicolas Cage's superhero movies, which in contrast to this one are entirely fictional. Many of the details from Orlov's life in Lord of War were directly lifted from the allegations surrounding Bout's personal life and illegal activities, the connections implied by these allegations, and Bout's own testimonies during his trial. Soon after the release of Lord of War, human rights group Amnesty International not only praised but even endorsed the movie because of how it shines a spotlight on the global illicit arms trafficking industry, represented by fictional protagonist Yuri Orlov, being such a believable version of real arms dealers like Victor Bout. Though Yuri Orlov is based on various arms dealers, Lord of War's true story inspiration is mainly Victor Bout, If the allegations against him are true, Victor Anatolievich Boot was an even more successful smuggler than Narcos, Mexico's Amado Carrillo Fuentes. However, instead of cocaine, Boot's primary products were firearms and ammunition. Based on multiple intelligence reports, eyewitness accounts, confessions, and paper and money trails collected by several law enforcement organizations, Bout used his African air freight business, Air Cess, to become the most prolific gun runner in the world from the 90s to the early 2000s. This earned Bout the nicknames Sanctions Buster and Merchant of Death, as he was particularly adept at getting around UN arms embargoes in order to supply various armed groups in countries such as Angola, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, the Congo, and Liberia. Bout also allegedly supplied weapons to war criminal and former president of Liberia Charles Taylor during the First Liberian Civil War in the late 90s, which is referenced in Lord of War when Orlov works with Liberian president and warlord Andre Baptiste, Eamon Walker. Another thing that Victor Boot had in common with convicted Mexican drug lords is that he used legitimate businesses and activities to cover his tracks. In fact, Aircess has also provided air freight services to the United Nations as well as the French, American, and African governments. He even provided support towards freeing Russian hostages when law enforcers negotiated with the Taliban during 1995's air stand hostage crisis. Even after a United Nations report on forged documents related to a large export of weapons by a Bulgarian company linked Aircess to gun-running activities in 2000, Bout and his associates have maintained that not only is he a legitimate businessman, but an ecologist and environmentalist who believes in saving the rainforest. Although Boot's case isn't as publicized as the U.S. war on drugs, his exploits as a gun runner not only served as Lord of War's true story inspiration, but also led to investigative journalist Douglas Farah to write the book Merchant of Death, which details Boot's confirmed and alleged activities. After avoiding the law for almost 20 years, Boot was arrested in Thailand by the Royal Thai Police for terrorism charges in 2008, extradited to the U.S. in 2010, and convicted by a Manhattan federal court for aiding a terrorist organization and conspiring to kill U.S. citizens and officials in 2011. This led to Victor Bout receiving a 25-year prison sentence, which he has been serving at the U.S. Penitentiary, Marion, in Illinois, since 2012. While Hollywood actor Nicolas Cage is notorious for making bad movies, Lord of War is definitely not one of them. Apart from the fact that Cage has a striking resemblance to Victor Boot, Lord of War also did a decent job of loosely adapting details from Boot's life in order to craft a compelling semi-autobiographical tale. For instance, while Boot agrees with United Nations documents saying that he was born in Tajik on January 13, 1967, South African intelligence says that Boot is ethnically Ukrainian, which was adopted by Lord of War as Yuri Orlov's origin. Moreover, while Yuri worked closely with his younger brother Vitaly Orlov, Jared Leto in the movie, in real life, Victor was often accompanied by his older brother Sergei Boot. Curiously, Lord of War didn't feature a part of Boot's life, which, considering Nicolas Cage's knack for playing intelligent monsters, would have made Yuri Orlov better. Notably missing from Lord of War is how Boot graduated from Russia's Military Institute of Foreign Languages while allegedly serving as a soldier and translator for the Soviets during the heyday of the USSR, which is how he mastered several languages. While both Bout and Orlov have an uncle that used to be a Soviet general, Orlov's Soviet ties ends there. Instead of being a former Russian intelligence and army operative who was supposedly discharged in 1991, Lord of War's Yuri Orlov was a Ukrainian-American immigrant whose command of different languages was born out of the necessity to survive in the global arms trade during the 80s. These differences are understandable, as Boat's real origin as a Soviet soldier would likely pull focus from his gun-running empire and its ties to the U.S. government. Much like many other convicted criminals whose exploits inspired Netflix movie/series, Victor Bout was in prison for many years. While Lord of War ends with Yuri Orlov evading authorities, as Bout was still at large when the movie was made, Victor Bout had been in prison for about a decade and was likely to remain incarcerated for the next 15 years. However, Bout was relocated to Russia as part of a prisoner exchange, with incarcerated U.S. basketball player Brittany Griner released by Moscow so that Victor Bout would be extradited. Bout was released from prison in December 2022 and currently has political aspirations in Russia. While Lord of War introduced aspects of Victor Bout's life through Yuri Orlov, the BBC documentary The Notorious Mr. Bout reveals much more about the man's real life. The Notorious Mr. Bout contains footage from Bout's own home videos, his career as an arms smuggler, and even his hobby as a filmmaker. Though not as popular as Netflix's most controversial documentaries, fans of Lord of War definitely need to see The Notorious Mr. Bout, as it is a much more in-depth look into Bout's life and work. After debuting at the Sundance Film Festival in 2014, Weil hides a criminal his crimes, sometimes the interests of the U.S. government, by arming the political rivals of their enemies, who the government cannot be publicly affiliated with. A disillusioned Valentine hears a knock at the door. As Yuri predicted, looks at Yuri for a moment and rebukes him. Yuri is released and soon returns to the arms trade. The film concludes with a statement that the 5 largest arms producers in the world, the United States, United Kingdom, Russia, China, and France, are also the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Nicolas Cage's Yuri Orlov, an international arms dealer who sells guns to anyone who can pay. Ethan Hawke as Jack Valentine, an incorruptible Interpol agent and the primary threat to Yuri's livelihood. Jared Leto as Vitaly Orlov, Yuri's brother and business partner. Bridget Moynahan as Ava Fontaine, a world-renowned supermodel and Yuri's wife, and Walker as Andreas Baptist Sr., an unscrupulous and violent dictator in control of Liberia based on former president of Liberia Charles Taylor. The cast also includes Samir Habias, Andreas Baptist Jr., the son of Andreas Baptist Sr., Ian Hollis, Simeon Wise, an infamous arms dealer and rival to Phoenix, as Candy, Thea Orlov's girlfriend, and Eugene Lazara, Soviet Union. General and Yuri's Uncle production. Lord of War originated a couple of years before 2004 when Andrew Niccol, a New Zealand screenwriter, wrote the original script and agent of the Creative Artists Agency, eventually gave Philippe Rassati, French film producer, the script in 2004, summarizing it as a Goodfellas in the world of arms dealing. Rousset was impressed by the script, but could not find an American studio that would take it on, as it was pitched to studios right before the beginning of the Iraq War. As commented by Entertainment Weekly, studios were not eager to finance a film that drew troubling conclusions about the role of the American military providing weapons to dictators. An additional complication was that scenes in the script were written to occur in up to 13 different countries, requiring filming in varying locations. The film planned to make use of the United Kingdom tax fund provision, but the expenses cap in Section 48 of the Finance Act of 2004 disqualified the film. South Africa provided financial incentives for FIL filming, such as paying back 15% of all expenditures incurred within its borders. Rousset reported to Variety that the financing necessary for the film was a mixture of debt taken on with Citibank West, the VIP3 German tax fund, and foreign sales. The remainder was paid by Rusal. Production shooting began on July 19, 2004. Production was primarily based in South Africa, the Czech Republic, and New York City. Scenes in Ukraine were filmed in the Czech Republic, and scenes in Africa, the Caribbean, and Beirut were all filmed in South Africa. Effort was taken to have extras that looked appropriate for every country, depicted both in attire and ethnicity. Due to the film's low budget, many scenes were constructed with only basic elements. One scene consisted entirely of 10,000 clay bricks and an extra North African garp. While filming in the Czech Republic, Niccol discovered it was cheaper to purchase real firearms rather than props, and so purchased 3,000. Kalashnikovs. Most were sold back at a loss, though some were sawed in half to remove them from circulation. Niccol commented that he found it disturbing how easy it was to purchase them. Niccol met a variety of arms dealers during the production process, which he came to like. He tribute their likability, despite their profession, to the fact that they were very good salesmen. A particular scene in the film featured a line of 50-72 tanks. These were provided by a source in the same country, and they told Niccol that he could use them until December, as they were needed back by then to sell to Libya. NATO had to be told about the tanks. A satellite imagery suggested a weapons buildup in the country. Another sequence of showed Yuriko piloting an anti-12 Transport Planet, the plane was provided by an arms dealer, and it was actively being used for transporting firearms during the time of production. Lord of War movie review Yuri Lafargus that his products kill fewer people than tobacco and alcohol has a point, but it's more fun and takes longer to diet that way. There are few pleasures to be had from an AK-47 bullet to the brain and no time to enjoy them. Yuri's an international arms dealer who's done business with every army, but the Salvation Army he cheerfully tours the world's flashpoints all war salesman. In a dark suit and tie, Lord of War is a bullet comedy funny in a catch-22 sort of way, and at the same time an angry outcry against the gun traffic that turns 12-year-olds into killers and cheapens human life to the point where might makes not only right, but everything else. Yuri is played by Nicolas Cage in another of those performances you cannot easily imagine anyone else doing. He plays an immigrant from Ukraine who has the cocky self-assurance, the snaky surface charm, the breezy intellectual justification for the most indie, defensible acts will sell to anyone, anytime, he tells us during his narration, which confides these secrets of his trade he never sold to Osama bin Laden because he was always bouncing checks. Yuri's world is a small one. He has few competitors and a short but frequently dated list of clients. The world's leading arms dealer when Yuri goes into business is Simian-wise Ian Holm, who prefers not to do business with people he thinks are evil, although his definition of evil is extremely flexible. Yuri asks Simeon to let them team up and offers Simeon rejection. Eventually lose a lot of business by that decision. The clients come from all over there. There is a moment in the film when Yuri gets some bad news. Peace talks have started in a particularly promising market. He shifts his focus to the Bosnian arena. When they say they're having a war, they keep their word. He also finds two good customers in Africa, the Liberian dictator, Baptist Sr., and Walker, and his son, Baptist Jr., Sammy Robbie Sr. is capable of shooting people dead without notice. Just in a fit of pique during a meeting with Yuri, he kills an inattentive aide and seems ready to shoot Yuri next, but Yuri grabs the gun back and says, "Now you'll have to buy it because it's a used gun." It's the kind of joke that appeals to Senior Yuri's life and even his fortune are saved. Yuri lives in Manhattan, luxury with the former model Ava Fontaine, Bridget Moynahan, who believes him or pretends to believe him when he says he's in the international shipping business, that business takes a turn for the better with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the sudden appearance on the black market of enormous caches of weapons. Luckily, Yuri is related to a now retired general in Ukraine, and they do business, the movie directed by Andrew Niccol. The Truman Show Gattaca has some of the same stylistic aggressiveness as David O. Russell's Three Kings. Consider a brilliant Tierley montage that takes a bullet's view as it moves from ortho assembly line to finishing packaging distribution sale. And eventual use of the montage ends with the bullet passing through the brain of a young man. It makes the point that at every step along the way, arms manufacturers are producing death as their end product that doesn't much bother Yuri, who believes that wars will be fought whether or not he sells arms, in that he is correct. There is the disagreement, however, of a stubborn Interpol agent named Valentine Ethan Hawke, who thinks she could save some lives by putting Yuri out of business. Some of their encounters resemble the spy versus spy feature in Mad Magazine, as when Valentine chases a ship filled with arms and Yuri is able to repaint its name and disguise it before the law gets close enough, helping Yuri at first. And then a distinct problem for him is his younger brother Vitaly Jared Leto. When they're desperately disguising the ship and need a Dutch flag, they do not have it. Is Vitaly's lateral thinking that suggests a French flag flown sideways looks like a Dutch flag after movies like Hotel Rwanda, Before the Rain, and Welcome to Sorrow. The cold cynicism of Lord of War plays like a deadly footnote. People are killed because guns are available. Wars lower the average age of soldiers until in some places they are fought by children with no idea of their original cause. It's hypnotic, like the G of a poisonous snake, how Yuri stares into the face of this horror and counts his profits will fate, and justice eventually catch up with him, may be, unless money is the answer. In Yuri's experience, I have a weird interest in illegal business practices, and before you call every safety organization on me, I don't mean it like that. I don't have an interest in conducting illegal business, but I am really interested in reading about it. Have I come to your tits now? excellent, but these kinds of legal businesses can range from drugs to murder. But a day we're taking a look at something less mainstream and lack of a better word. Of course, it occurs a lot in our big world, but not as many people look into it as the other ones. I mentioned this movie is about a legal arms trader Yuri Orr of Nicolas Cage and his rise to become the best at this craft, and with him for the most part is his brother Vitaly Jared Leto. But it isn't easy supplying guns for our heroes as they have problems with a rivaling arms dealer Ian Holm and Daytonacious Interpol agent Ethan Hawke. And that is interesting in itself, of course, but the plot gets even more interesting, Sync. Yuri, throughout the plot, starts questioning the morality of his work more and more. And to be completely honest, I find the plot really interesting and engaging. There wasn't 1 minute of the plot that wasn't interesting to me. It was so well written and suspenseful that I just didn't find anything uninteresting in it. The characters were all really well written and never felt out of place or even unrealistic, and I am so happy to see Nicolas Cage give a really good performance. Now, to be fair, I have, for the most part, only seen over-the-top performances from him, and the only legitimately good I have seen from him prior to this was Joe, where he was amazing, but I know he got it in him to be great, and here he proved it. Jared Leto was also great in the movie as his brother, and Ethan Hawke as Interpol agent Jack Valentine was also really good. The score for the movie was done by Anthony Pinto and was, in my opinion, really good. There was a lot of use of piano and acoustic guitar, which helped build a lot of suspense and emotion, which is exactly what was needed. The music was also part of helping hold up the thought-provoking plot and characters by having that type of vibe, if that makes any sense. The movie was both written and directed by Andrew Niccol, and he shows that he got a knack for both the writing, both plot and dialogue is excellent, and the camera work direction of the movie is really good. The movie is visually impressive, especially during the movie's amazing opening credits, which follows the life of a single bullet featuring the excellent song For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. Watch other information about this film. Lord of War stars Nicolas Cage as immigrant Yuri Orloff, who starting humbly in the Bronx becomes a wildly successful international arms dealer who earns the title Lord of War. Yuri soon selling AK-47s by the Kila, offering tanks and military aircraft to third world countries and finding buyers for his weapons of mass destruction, Aski. Clean Interpol agent Jack Valentine, played by Ethan Hawke, relentlessly pursues Yuri Valentine as an honorable, just man intent on stopping Yuri. Yuri sees his role as an unnecessary evil, choosing not to take Sidor. Get emotionally involved. Lord of War contains valuable moral lessons, but it is drenched in violent content, strong offensive language, Drugus's actual situations, some nudity, and strong elements of political correctness. For example, I tasks viewers to unquestioningly believe purported and suspicious facts, such as there are more gun shops in the U.S. than there are McDonald's restaurants. The United States and the other major superpowers are painted as the real thugs responsible for arming the world and its psychotic dictators. Though cleverly executed, Lord of War is a little too preachy and self-righteous, strong humanist worldview. Rebuked for its immorality about an international arms dealer who profits from war, with strong themes of political correctness, with the subtle implication that guns are evil, and a few anti-us messages, notion of freedom fighters, slammed, as well as a couple of minor evolutionary references and light and anti-capitalist content, 75 strong. Obscenities, 4 profanities, and 2 blasphemies. Strong violence includes shootings, execution, genocide, bombings, and much blood. Children and families shot for amusement, body burning after explosion, children lined against wall and shot, teenagers shot in head, and man struck in face with crowbar. Sexual content includes kissing, fornication, adultery, and suggestive dancing. Brief, upper, FE, female nudity, rear male, and female nudity in several scantily clad women, much drinking, much smoking, drugs, ales, and drug abuse, and miscellaneous immorality includes the notion of starting a marriage with lies and deceits, instances where marriages end up anyway, resisting an adulterous affair, strictly out of fear of sexually transmitted diseases, deception, denial, exploiting third world countries, profiting on wars and pain, using children as soldiers. A belief is expressed that evil will inevitably prevail. Several characters confront the immoral protagonist and reflect a moral or ethical worldview, and final comments rebuke the hypocrisy of the protagonist. Lord of War opens brilliantly and enthusiastically with a first-hand perspective in the life of a bullet. Suspected it is eventually fired from a weapon and follows its final course through the head of a young man. Whether he was an opposing soldier or an innocent bystander, it is not clear, but he is just as surely dead. This short experience insinuates that guns and bullets are the real culprits responsible for the death of the young man. But is this a simplistic approach to a controversial subject, or merely misdirection by the morally conflicted Lord of War? Tackles these issues, and later weekly points out that these same tools can be used by some to keep peace instead of kill immigrant. Yuri Orlov, starting humbly in the Bronx, becomes a wildly successful international arms dealer who earns the title Lord of War. The business of war is apparently lucrative for a few, but always dangerous and ethically off the charts. Yuri. Nicolas Cage convinces his younger brother Vitaly Jared Leto to give up on the family restaurant and begin a brothers-in-arms partnership. Yuri, lacking any moral compass and having a natural talent to rationalize his own actions, adjusts well to his illegal lifestyle. For his part, Vitaly finds comfort in his druggist, numbing his heart from the pain he sees on the battlefield soon. Yuri is selling AK-47s by the kilo, offering tanks and military aircraft to third-world countries and finding buyers for his weapons of mass destruction, his wife Ava Bridget. Moynahan initially chooses not to know the truth of her husband's shady dealings, but later is confronted with the thought that her house and every possession in it is blood. On it, in contrast, Yuri agrees that some things may be black or white, but confides that his personal favorite color is gray. Meanwhile, Yuri is relentlessly pursued by squeaky clean Interpol agent Jack Valentine. Ethan Hawke is noteworthy for Lord of War that the main character's enemy is really the good guy. Valentine is an honorable and just man who is intent in stopping Yuri's activities. He believes this Lord of War is son of those keenly responsible for the thousands of lives lost through armed conflicts, civil wars, ethnic cleansings, and revolutions, but Yuri sees his role as a necessary evil, choosing not to take sides or get emotionally involved with the specifics. Lord of War is a great story of a conflicted man who ultimately faces the consequences of his actions. As Jack Valentine points out, Yuri will one day get what's coming to him regrettably. Though faced with the prospect of losing everything and everyone in his personal life, Yuri chooses to ignore his last vestiges of conscience and continue in his blood-drenched lifestyle. It seems that it is the only thing in life where he finds any self-worth dodging bullets and running amid the dead bodies. Yuri keeps reminding his brother this is not a war watching children shout execution style or merely for sport. Yuri maintains this position when Vitaly's seen enough to risk his life and the lucrative deal to protect people he will never meet. This movie is cleverly made, beautifully filmed, and the story's characters are rich and compelling. The movie comes off a little preachy at times, but raises some legitimate concerns. The United States and the other major superpowers are painted as the real thugs responsible for arming the world and its psychotic dictators. The president is even called the biggest gun runner in the world, but that label is uttered by Yuri and could well be another attempt to rationalize his own illicit behavior. Lord of War contains some valuable moral lessons, but it is drenched in violent content, strong, offensive language, drug use, sexual situations, some nudity, and strong elements of political correctness. In addition, it asks viewers to unquestioningly believe purported and suspicious facts, such as there are more gun shops in the U.S. than there are McDonald's restaurants, though cleverly executed. Lord of War shoots itself in the foot by being a little too preachy, politically correct, and self-righteous about Yuri's profession and about Yuri himself. Nicolas Cage is a man that likes to run with flashlights with strange haircuts on his head. I'm not into that, so most of the time I'm trying to stay clear of him. I don't watch his movies, so he doesn't try to creep on the magazine covers that much. I hear now. And then, though, that Lord of War is the one good Nicolas Cage movie. When Josie browsed Netflix on Saturday morning and asked me, "Baby, do you want to watch this?" It's the one good Nick Cage movie. It was too much for me. I cracked and finally watched it. Lord of War is a fictional account of the gun trade. Yuri Orlov, Cage, is a fictional character, but apparently the history lesson in the movie is pretty accurate, and Orlov is a plausible example of the kind of person the drug trade builds. The son of an Ukrainian immigrant in Little Odessa, New York, Orlov wasn't satisfied to work at the family restaurant. So one day after witnessing a violent mob confrontation in the neighborhood, he decided to start selling gun with the urge to be the best. He meets Simeon Y's home at Berlin Gun Fair, who make him understand that the only way to succeed as a gun salesman is that feed both sides of a war, so they can destroy each other stone cold in front of human sorrow. Orov quickly rises to the top and gets whatever he ever dreamed of, included the stoning hot AAF Fontaine Moynahan. With the success and the fame also come Jack Valentine, Ethan Hawke, a dedicated Interpol agent with a Robin Hood complex determined to take Orov down. I don't know how much of a documentary value Lord of War has, but what I liked best about it is its presentation, Yuri. Orov rose up from the dirty streets of Little Odessa to become someone, but it's at the price of his soul-feeding African dictators' weapons so they can conduct massacre over. Massacre is something the viewer tends to forget, as Orov is being portrayed in a very sympathetic manner. Other characters don't seem to forget it, though, as they gradually make a vacuum around him, at the movie goes. Lord of War is one of those movies that I'm not sure how to watch. It tries to place itself above morality, but I feel it did a poor job at being objective about the work of Yuri. Orov, whenever his brother Vitaly Leto and him saw people die from the weapons they sold, Orlov kept saying, "It's not our fight." I beg to differ. If you sell guns, it's your fight. If you're feeding both sides weapon, there's an ethics problem to be had somewhere down the road. I guess the lesson to be learned is that if you only care about money, people will leave you alone. In your tower of value, Veritas, everything needs balance, even war, when it's economically enhanced by money-hungry people. It's not war anymore, just a senseless massacre. Lord of War is an awkward bit of storytelling, but it's a sincere effort to say something that matters more detail. After spending over 2 hours with the Lord of War, it caused me to appreciate all of the wonderful things that have been given to us by the Lord of Life. These positive thoughts were not directly inspired by what the film, but surfaced as a reaction in order to counter the sadism and evil presented. Throughout the story, after being overloaded with such hostility, some kind of recovery was needed to bring hope back into my mind. Ukrainian immigrant Yuri of Nicolas Cage moved with his family to Little Odessa in Brooklyn, New York. When he was 6 years old, growing up with no vision or direction, one day Yuri witnesses a gun shootout in a restaurant and suddenly becomes interested in firearms. Yuri has now found his passion for life, and he not only begins to sell guns, but also establishes himself as son of the premier suppliers of firearms in almost all of the war-torn areas off the world. Yuri is shown to be human in many ways, but becomes more of a machine than any of the weapons she sells. Probably every reason a movie is rated R is present in this film. There is a fair amount of foul language, including the F-word, as well as instances of violence and sex, since the movie revolves around gun selling. It is correct to predict that they are used on people. Some of these moments are very explicit and bloody. Also explicit are some of the sex scenes, as well as some scenes that involve nudity. Furthermore, there are a handful of scenes depicting characters using narcotics, particularly moments when characters are snorting cocaine. One redeeming scene shows Yuri in a hotel room after he has just made a deal with African warlord Andre Baptist. Sonora and Walker in his room are two women who have been given to Yuri as a gift, and they are dancing very seductively. It's obvious Yuri can have his way with them, but even though he is tempted, he refuses their offer. Yuri says he can't, and we can infer it is because he has recently married his dream girl Ava Fontaine, Bridget Moynahan. Unfortunately, while Yuri has this moment of fidelity, it is unfortunate to not see that this is something consistent with his character. Speaking of Yuri's character, the most challenging part to watching this film is that fact that you have to spend 2 hours with an unsympathetic character. Aside from the aforementioned scene where he avoids temptation, Yuri is not a likable guy. He lies to Eva, he loves guns, and does not care how the guns he sells will be used. He also fails to realize how detrimental he is to his family. He justifies everything he does, but none of his reasoning really excuses his immoral behavior. There are good characters throughout the film, but they are predominantly sideline characters that only appear from time to time. We don't spend nearly as much time with them like we do with the warlord, Yuri. Having an unsympathetic character isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, it can be good to be challenged through this kind of storytelling. However, there is something else about this film that does not sit right with me. While the movie boasts at the end that it is based on real events, so much of the movie did not ring true. I felt seduced into thinking it was a good movie, when after evaluating the movie it was really good production value. More than anything else, many common movie conventions are used and a lot of scenes played out very predictably. For instance, watching Yuri recruit his brother Vitaly Jared Leto for one more job after Vitaly has gotten his act together was a huge indicator of the coming tragedy, and Yuri meeting Ava and how he wins her was just too far-fetched to even enjoy. It is hard to know exactly behind making a movie like this. It seems it could be highly charged with a political agenda, and for that reason has skewed the entertainment value. And it's fine to be challenged, but not in such a conventional way for this reviewer. I cannot see much reason to spend time watching this one. Positive. The Lord of War is an explicit, exciting, and controversial film about a small arms dealer and both his internal struggle to justify his means as well as his conventional struggle to succeed and evade capture. While this movie is profane and explicit in its depiction of gun running, it is so in order to accurately depict the lifestyle. There is extensive drug use where Yuri and his brother snort cocaine lines, as well as a scene where Yuri snorts a mixture of gunpowder and cocaine. Some of the violence is extensive and at times gory. However, it is in the interest of reality that the director shot the scenes how he did. For instance, if a man in a movie shoots at a person with a small handgun, the viewer would not expect them to explode if a movie is shot in a tangent. Reality, the message of the picture is skewed. Perhaps the greatest tribute to this factor is Black Hawk Down. Conversely, however, if Yuri's life is not portrayed as violent, neglectful, deceitful, etc., his demise would become moot and the reality of the picture lost. Do not ever view secular films with the preconception that they are based on Christian values. It will ruin any movie that you see. While there are extensive intercourse scenes depicted in this movie, they are shot artistically and do not reveal an extreme amount of nudity. The director took care in shooting the sex scenes in a way that is not explicit, but shows the nature of the business in the real world. While it may seem unnecessary to inundate ourselves with this material, it is simultaneously wise to do so in order to attain a realistic view of the world that we live in. This movie is an excellent example of both true and romanticized reality, in that while some aspects aren't Hollywoodized, there is a certain human emotion as well as emotional distance that Yuri deals with. Andrew Niccol is a very smart guy. He wrote The Truman Show, the first draft of The Terminal for the beer, and wrote and directed the supreme sci-fi in Mordecai, which has to be one of the most preeminent pieces of entertainment of the last 20 years. In 2005, he released Lord of War, which came and went in theaters, but it's a film that I feel is widely undervalued, an action flick with a brain. However, cynical, and it's a title that deserves reconsideration and a second life. It sits at 61% overall at Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't terrible, but I really feel that way too many critics missed the boat on this one, and that's a shame because with more support, it might have had a better chance at connecting some people. Loved it and saw the film for what it is. A dry, ironic, and savage indictment of military policy and the worldwide demand for guns and wholesale death. Lionsgate, who released the film after it was produced independently, did a poor job of marketing. Aside from the incredible one-sheets, selling it as a straightforward action tale and showcasing the film's explosions in the trailer, totally making it out to be a standard blow. Up something that Lord of War most definitely is not based on. True events. The busy narrative concerns international arms dealer Yuri Orlov Cage as he travels from war zone to war zone looking for potential buyers. He supplies whole armies, ruthless mercenaries, and sometimes entire nations with their guns and tanks and battlefield equipment, and he gets paid cold hard cash, lots and lots of it. Yuri has zero conscience. These people, no matter how poor or uneducated, want their guns, and they're going to get them one way or another. So why not have them buy their goods from him? He's just giving the people what they want. On Yuri's trail is an FBI agent played by Ethan Hawke, who is always one step behind. And there's some B-story action involving Yuri's model wife, hottie Bridget Moynahan, which isn't as engaging as the material that deals with Yuri's inherently dangerous profession, but by no means SNS the movie. He's also got a cokehead brother played by wide-eyed Jared Leto, who might become Yuri's undoing. Niccol's poison arrow, satire, darts hit all of their intended targets in Lord of War. This is a purposefully cold and pessimistic movie about a merchant of death, a Lord of War, a guy who most likely isn't going to learn anything by the time the narrative comes to a conclusion. He's happy to be doing what he's doing. Thrilled, actually. Yuri isn't likable, but Cage makes him engaging, and it's one of his better performances, and came during that solid run of work, which included Matchstick Men adaptation and The Weatherman. He seemed very much attuned to the script's tonal shifts, and he appeared right at home playing an immoral, greedy hustler. The film also has a note-perfect ending that I just love, which comments bitterly on all that has come before it. The story really couldn't have ended any other way if it wanted to be taken seriously, and I love how Niccol didn't back down from the nasty truth. That his movie displays Lord of War also has a scary, brilliant opening title sequence. One of the best I've ever seen. To be totally honest, giving the audience a front-row bullet-eye view of the birth of ammunition from melted metal all the way to being placed in the chamber of an M16 before being fired into someone's skull. The camera positions itself on the side of a random bullet, and we follow that bullet's life from creation to eventual resting place. It's a small tour de force of filmmaking, announcing right up front that this movie isn't playing by the normal set of rules, working with extra slick images from ace cinematographer Amir Mire, Bad Boys 2, Man of Steel. Niccol crafted an exceedingly photogenic film, a work that shows how sexy guns can be, but one that's also unafraid to show their deadly capabilities. Extra information in earlier films. As a writer-director, Gattaca and S1MZ, Annie Plus, his script for The Truman Show. Andrew Niccol looks to New Scientist articles and current cultural trends for the seeds of, if this goes on, awful warnings here. He is more interested in why the world is hell now and how it has become that way than in how much worse things will be in the future. And he seizes upon a big subject unduly neglected by the movies. Many films have dwelled on the ins and outs of the illegal drug business, but Lord of War applies the good FIS-style insider, confessional approach to a trade where death isn't an unfortunate side effect, but the main attraction. The arms business. Much of the entry-level material is striking. A credit sequence gives a bullet's eye view as it takes a long journey from an American factory to an African head, and the narrator spiels lovingly about the Soviet 1947 model. Kalashnikov, the AK-47, the real's weapon of mass destruction, the Scarface dealer Dicom. Never get high on your own. Supply is wittily updated in the first rule of gun running. Never get shot with your own merchandise. But it's hard to make the weapons business as perversely exhilarating as the dope trade movies fetishize guns, as the script acknowledges with the dictator's son obsessed with owning the gun of Rambo. But there's surprisingly little excitement in watching cases of ex-Soviet machine parts being traded on third world docks or in the back of Beyond, even with hair's breadth escapes, car bomb assassinations, and vividly horrid characters like Aeon Walker's all-purpose evil African dictator, as often in criminal memoirs, it is hard to get really involved with a main character, who despite Nicolas Cage's insidious charm, is just all Yuri Orlov's unapologetic candor. Can't make you care when his wife wants to leave him or his more morally ambivalent brother cracks up the cat and mouse between Yuri and his Interpol nemesis Hawke leads to a last real shift, which is probably necessary from an audience's point of view, reminding us that crooks like Yuri are minor operators next to the big governments who sell weapons legally, but really shouldn't be news to supposed professionals after moving from Odessa, Ukraine to New York, United States. Yuri Orlov Nicolas Cage decides to become an illegal international arms dealer alongside his younger brother Vitaly Jared. Leto supplying an ungodly amount of weaponry to disturbed and deprived areas of the world. Yuri quickly becomes a multi-millionaire before marrying and seemingly creating the perfect life, all while being hunted down by a large group of federal agents, spearheaded by Jack Valentine. Ethan Hawke, based on real events. Lord of War manages to give the viewer a brilliantly realistic view of what goes on behind closed doors when it comes to arms dealing, filmed between August and November of 2004 before being released. In 2005, it could be argued that Lord of War may go down as one of the finest films undertaken by the renowned Nicolas Cage whenever a film such as this one decides to explore a real-world subject. Objects that are often brushed under the carpet on a political and entertainment level, they deserve to be highlighted, especially when there's large elements of truth to them. Also, straight away, what struck me about Lord of War was the way in which the filmmaker managed to carry out the storytelling aspect of the flick. The premise of the movie was extremely easy to comprehend and never really found itself overcomplicating matters at any stage, something that other films of this nature can find themselves doing. At times, there didn't seem to be any pointless additional subplots, and its hitch stood at a rather modest 123 minutes, seemed just about perfect, because at no point did the feeling of boredom or stagnation enter the fray. Something else that stood out to me had to be the production-level cinematography and the general diversity of the filming locations and cast on display. The filmmaker managed to add an international flavor throughout the flick, while also managing to maintain a primarily American feel, with the vast majority of the filming being done in New York, United States, Cape Town, South Africa, or the Czech Republic. Each of the unique locations on display added its own unique ounce of character and charm, making Lord of War really stand out from your run-of-the-mill thriller in terms of the cast. It could be argued that Nicolas Cage manages to put in his finest cinematic performance in Lord of War. The American actor looked perfect in a role in which he had to undertake the character of a cold-hearted, goal-orientated personality, while also having to inject a touch of humor in there too. Jared Leto, who later went on to win as Oscar for his performance in Dallas Buyers Club, showed a tremendous amount of promise in this similar support role. Portraying Vali Orlov, a man struggling with addiction and the horrendously difficult morale decisions thrown his way elsewhere, a young Ethan Hawke also appeared, adopting the role of Jack. Valentine, a straight-laced federal agent Ted with preventing the illegal arms operation going on. His performance wasn't award-worthy, but at the same time, it did no harm on his career. The same could be said for Bridget Moynahan, who starred as Ava Fontaine, the wife of Yuri Oraval. In all, it's difficult to give one individual reason as to why Lord of War is such a spectacular flick, but when a production decides to approach such a real and hard-hitting subject with such a refreshingly open and honest perspective, it's hard to argue against its greatness. This film, directed by Andrew Niccol, written by Andrew Niccol, produced by Andreas Gr. Norm Golightly, Andrew Niccol, Chris Roberts, Christopher Eberts, Nicolas Cage, Philippe Russa, starring Nicolas Cage, Jared Leto, Bridget Moan, Ian Holm, Ian Hawke, cinematography Amir Mokri, edited by Zach Steinberg, music by Antonio Pinto, production companies Descendant Pictures. Entertainment manufacturing company VIP3 Media and FS, Saturn Films, distributed by Lionsgate Films, United States Arclight Films. International release date September 16, 2005 in United States. Running time 121 minutes. Countries United States, Germany. Language English. Budget 42 to 60 million. Box office 72.6 million. So guys, this is their review of Lord of War movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if I like this video, please like its Harriet and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.